After the Messenian War, Sparta stood as a winner with a problem it could not ignore. It controlled wide farmland, but the people who worked it were not citizens. They were helots, forced laborers tied to the land, far more numerous than the Spartans themselves. The conquest brought food and wealth, but it also created a permanent fear. A state built on a small ruling class now sat on top of a large, resentful population. This imbalance changed everything. Every harvest depended on helot hands, yet every season carried the risk of sabotage, escape, or revolt. Sparta could not simply release them without losing its economy, and it could not watch them closely enough through normal means. Traditional justice and ordinary policing never fit the scale of the threat. The question became urgent and practical. How did a city keep control when the controlled outnumbered the controllers? Sparta answered by reshaping itself around prevention, not reaction. It treated helot anger as a constant, not a temporary mood, and it planned for rebellion as if it already waited just beyond the next hill. That required discipline at home and pressure in the countryside, year after year, without pause. Control had to feel permanent to work. From this point on, Spartan survival depended on making the helots believe that resistance always ended the same way. Sparta did not simply hold the helots down with occasional punishment. It treated them like a danger that never went away. The state organized its thinking around that fear. Helots worked the land, fed the citizen army, and outnumbered their masters. That imbalance shaped policy. Resistance did not feel like a remote possibility. It felt like a future event that required planning. So, control became a system, not a reaction. Sparta watched for signs, tracked trouble, and trained itself to assume the worst. A helot who gathered friends, spoke boldly, or looked too confident became a problem before he acted. The state encouraged citizens to see obedience as fragile and force as normal. The goal was not justice, the goal was prevention. That mindset hardened into a kind of internal security doctrine. Spartans treated the helot population as an enemy living inside their borders, not as workers under their protection. Every year brought the same calculation. If fear weakened, revolt grew. That belief pushed Sparta toward methods that stayed quiet, fast, and deniable. From this point on, rule meant anticipating rebellion and striking first. Sparta's answer did not stay on paper. It got built into childhood. The agoge took boys and reshaped them as a single, disciplined group, trained to obey, endure hunger, and keep moving even when fear or pain arrived. Year after year, it produced the same result. Youths hardened on purpose, not just for battle, but for pressure. And in a city that expected trouble from within, that kind of toughness carried a second use. By late adolescence, the system sorted them. Not every young Spartan became the same kind of tool. Some showed speed, stamina, and the ability to act alone without breaking rules or losing control. Those traits mattered. A hoplite line fought shoulder to shoulder, but internal security demanded something else. It demanded silence, patience, and judgment in the dark. The agoge quietly highlighted the ones who could watch, wait, and strike without being seen. So another track emerged beside ordinary military training. The most capable youths got pulled toward tasks that sounded like tests but worked like preparation. They practiced living with little, moving without notice, and relying on themselves while still serving the state's needs. It tightened their loyalty and sharpened their edge. This selection did not create a new army. It created a pool of young men suited for covert work, ready for missions beyond the battlefield. The selection ended and the mission began. A small number of young Spartans left the usual routine and moved into the countryside as a quiet, organized force. This practice became known as the Krypteia. It did not look like an army unit because it did not act like one. It relied on separation, secrecy, and patience. These youths lived away from the city, beyond easy oversight, so their work stayed deniable. They did not travel in formation or carry themselves as soldiers on display. They spread out, stayed alone, or in tiny groups, and avoided being noticed. The point was not a battle. The point was presence, without proof. By day, they stayed hidden, moving carefully, learning the land and the people who worked it. At night, they went out to watch, to listen, and to choose moments when no one could easily speak back. That change mattered because it shifted control from the public to the private. Power no longer depended only on courts, officials, or open punishment. It also depended on an unseen hand in the fields and along the roads. The Krypteia turned young Spartans into instruments that could appear and vanish, leaving uncertainty behind. For the helot communities, the danger did not need to be constant. It only needed to feel possible anywhere after dark. Each year, Sparta's top officials, the ephors, performed a stark ritual of policy. They formally declared war on the helots, not on a foreign army, on the workers who lived all around them. The words mattered. In Greek life, killing carried religious danger as well as legal risk. Blood could stain a person. It could demand cleansing. Sparta found a way around that. Once war had been declared, a deadly idea took hold. A helot no longer counted as a protected subject. In that legal frame, a killing looked less like murder and more like an act of war. It changed who could strike and how the state could excuse it. The ephors' proclamation turned violence into something permitted, even expected, and it stripped away the need for ritual purification. This annual declaration did not merely allow violence, it made it routine. It returned every year like a reset button, renewing permission and removing hesitation. The message spread without needing speeches. Helot life depended on Spartan choice, not law or custom. For young men sent out to operate in secret, this mattered. They moved under a public umbrella of war, and the state's hands stayed clean. With the declaration in place, the next step became practical. Krypteia operatives did not strike at random. They watched. They learned who carried influence, who talked too boldly, who looked strong enough to lead others. Then they moved after dark, when help was far away and witnesses were fewer. It was not a battlefield tactic. It was selection. The message stayed simple. Strength and voice drew attention. These killings worked because they targeted the kinds of people a community leaned on. A strong worker, a confident organizer, a man known for refusing orders, removed without warning. The aim was not to punish a crime already committed, but to prevent one that might come. Each death created a question that never got answered. Who was next? Who had informed? Who could be trusted? Fear started doing the governing. Over time, the pattern trained whole communities to police themselves. Helots measured their words, hid their ambitions, and avoided gathering in ways that could look like planning. Even loyalty became risky because standing up for someone marked a person as bold. Sparta gained something more useful than chains. It gained uncertainty. The Krypteia's night hunts turned ordinary life into a calculation, and that calculation kept resistance small and isolated. The hunts no longer stayed limited to single targets. A wider system took shape, built to pressure whole communities at once. Men moved through helot life as watchers, noting who spoke too loudly, who gathered, who looked confident. People learned that nothing had to happen in public for danger to be real. The point was uncertainty. When everyone felt observed, everyone adjusted. Then came the disappearances. A worker left a field and did not return. A strong man vanished on a short walk between villages. No trial followed, no accusation that could be answered. Families asked questions and met silence. Neighbors learned to stop asking because attention itself carried risk. In that gap, no body, no explanation, fear spread further than any single killing. And sometimes the violence turned openly exemplary. A death happened where others would find it time to make the lesson unavoidable. It punished not only the person, but the idea that defiance paid. Villages responded in predictable ways. Meetings shrank, leaders softened their tone, young men avoided standing out. Compliance did not need constant force. It needed a few reminders delivered to everyone. Then a crisis hit that quiet terror alone could not contain. A massive earthquake tore through Sparta and shattered the sense of control. In the confusion, helots in Messenia rose up and fought back, turning fear into open resistance. For the Spartans, this looked like the nightmare they had always planned for. The internal enemy had surfaced all at once, and the state responded as if survival depended on speed. Covert hunting had worked by removing a few people to warn the many. Now the target became whole communities. Spartans tightened movement, demanded lists of men, and treated suspicion as proof. The secret methods scaled up into official action, with arrests and killings that no longer hid in the dark. Ancient accounts later claimed mass executions of helots chosen for strength, leadership, or simply being noticed. The point stayed the same. Terror had to feel unavoidable. After the revolt, the lesson Sparta took was blunt. Every calm season could be temporary. The crackdown did not end with the battlefield. It reset the rules of daily life. Helots learned that loyalty offered no guarantee, and Spartans learned that restraint looked like weakness. What had begun as selective nighttime violence turned into a statewide purge when pressure rose. The Krypteia's logic spread beyond its operatives. The whole system acted like a weapon. For a long time, what happened in Spartan fields stayed in Spartan fields. Then outsiders started writing. Thucydides, an Athenian historian, treated Sparta like a rival power to be measured, not admired, and his reports hinted at a state that solved problems by removing people. Plato, a philosopher, used Sparta as a model and a warning, and he nodded towards secret training meant to harden men for ruthless tasks. Later, writers tried to name the thing more clearly. Plutarch, a biographer working centuries after the fact, described young Spartans sent out with little support, living rough, watching and striking at night. He framed it as both discipline and control. That split mattered. If it was security policy, it sounded like planned policing. If it was an initiation, it sounded like education by violence. Either way, the victim stayed the same. Those accounts never fully agreed, and that uncertainty became part of the story. Some readers saw the Krypteia as a tool aimed outward, a way to keep rebellion from ever forming. Others saw it aimed inward, a test that trained Spartan youth to obey orders without hesitation. The most uncomfortable answer sat in the middle. The system worked because it trained killers and governed through fear at the same time. In the modern world, the Krypteia no longer stood as just a strange Spartan detail. It survived as a warning label. When people talked about state terror, they reached for examples where violence was not a breakdown of order, but the method of order. The Krypteia fit that pattern. It showed how a government treated a whole class of people as a permanent threat, and then built policy around fear. That made it echo in debates about policing and control, not because modern states copied Sparta directly, but because the logic felt familiar. Watch, isolate, strike. and let the uncertainty do the rest. The Krypteia also forced a hard point into the open. It only worked inside slavery. Without a captive workforce, there was no need for night hunts, no need for legal cover, no need for terror as routine. What changed most was the moral frame. In Sparta, terror got treated as governance, and governance got treated as virtue. In modern scrutiny, the same acts got named differently: intimidation, political violence, crimes against a population. That contrast mattered. It showed how a society could normalize cruelty when it protected privilege, and how later generations measured the cost in human lives, not just in stability.